You found us through fly fishing. You'll stay for our passion and the community. Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Podcast.
Yeah, but he doesn't get it. How come fly fishermen don't get it?
You only haul with the short power snap.
Look for where people walk and the insides of bends and hunt those.
The roof blew off and the interior walls got sucked out. And the trees are just coming up. And I mean, he's clearly not going to clear the trees.
It is not a fly fishing story. It's a story about me trying to understand my brother through fly fishing.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
We've been waiting for you. Follow our guests, follow us on Instagram, and share this episode and the love if you enjoy this podcast. And we are live in 3, 2, 1. How you doing, Mac?
I'm doing great, Dave. How are you doing?
Really good. Really good. We're going to jump into a lot today, I think. We're going to talk, some of your home waters where you guide out in kind of the North Carolina area. We're going to talk fly casting, a guide school you have going, a bunch of things. It seems like you're pretty busy out there. So before we jump into all that, take us back into your first memory of fly fishing. Let's start there, and then we'll grab your other stuff.
Sure. I started back in the Ozarks around Salem, Missouri as a kid. My grandfather's the one that introduced me to it. And that's kind of what got me started as a young kid was the time he spent with me and started me off with an old HMG Fenwick rod. And that's what I had as a kid, fished all through my youth basically with that rod. Right.
So the Fenwick and the Ozarks, talk about that. So the Ozarks, how long were you in the Ozarks? And then did you eventually head out of that area?
Yeah, we lived out there. I was born out there in the early 60s and we moved to East Tennessee in 69. And that was up in Greenville, Tennessee, up to the South Holston, Watauga, a lot of little mountain streams that come out of the North Carolina line in the mountains up there, like Paint Creek, Horse Creek area. And so I did most of, kindergarten through high school in East Tennessee. Then I went back to school in Missouri for college, and I moved here after college and been here ever since in Bryson City.
Yeah, that's right. And what got you to Bryson City originally?
Probably from hiking the Appalachian Trail. It comes through here through the park, and it comes all through the Nantahala National Forest, and the park being the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And I just remember when I went up to Maine, this had some of the biggest long-range views and biggest mountains in the East Coast or all around the house here. So when I looked at the map and realized 90% of this county was owned by the federal government, I thought, there's where I'm moving.
Huh.
Just because there's a lot of outdoor opportunity here.
Yeah, right. Right. And what is the break? I'm not great on my geography, but the border between Tennessee and North Carolina, where is that border?
Oh, the national park is on the state line. Newfound Gap, part of that's in Tennessee on the other side to the west of me. And then, the east side of Newfound Gap, Clingman's Dome, is one of the highest three peaks in the east. And then Mount LeConte's right there next to it. But, so it kind of runs northeast like the state line, and it's, real mountainous the whole way up to Virginia. So there's pretty big mountains. I mean, for the east, they're big mountains. They're like 6,700-foot mountains, and that sounds like, well, that's not that big, compared to out west. But then again, out west, you're starting at a mile high.
Yeah.
So it's the same relative perception is what I'm saying. We're starting down, like Tennessee starts down at like 800, 900 feet, looking up at 6,700 feet. So that's the same magnitude of big, relatively speaking.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah, this is really cool. So you're right on. I mean, you're pretty much right in the forest on the mountain. Are you pretty near the top of kind of I guess Great Smoky Mountains is huge, but are you kind of straddling both sides like Tennessee, North Carolina, kind of, similar areas?
Well, Bryson, where I live in a valley.
Okay.
It's a valley along the Tuckasegee River, and I live on Deep Creek, which is one of the larger creeks that come out of the national park. So the park line's about a mile from the house. So
oh, wow.
To go up high as a crow flies, there's a trail called Nolan Divide above the house. We walk up there quite a bit with the kids since they were little. You can walk up to Clingman's. It's about 11 miles up to 6,700 feet from the house here.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, you're in one of those amazing places because the Great Smoky Mountain, I mean, that seems like, well, it's definitely a huge, obviously, national park. What is it about the Great Smoky Mountains that makes it a national park?
Well, it became a park back in the 30s, and a lot of different organizations in this part of the country wanted to preserve it, to make it into a national park. And so the mid-30s is when the local, the trout population here, German brown trout and rainbow trout, was all stocked pretty much from locals. It wasn't from a state agency. In the early years, it was local people that would go up with, wagons and the old milk containers, and they'd actually put fish in all these different creeks after it was logged heavily in the 20s. So really, all the introduction of trout were basically from the local people that wanted to have a sport fishery. And of course, they thrived, and then they find out that you've heard about the native brook trout in the national park. It's unique. And then they realize, we got to get rid of all the invasives.
Right. Right.
So now it's this constant battle. Like a lot of the biologists and things want to preserve, a char that's 4 to 5 inches instead of having a sport fishery. That'll never fly.
Yeah.
With the local people, because the local people that put those in there, a lot of friends of mine that I fished with, it was their grandparents that stocked it. And of course, we want to see it. We want to see brown trout grow to large sizes and stuff. Not so much. I couldn't make a living if we had 4-inch fish.
No, there's a limit to the size. Well, brook trout are fun, and I haven't done a lot of brook trout fishing. We just got done with an episode up in the up north, quite a ways north, into looking at some of those giant brook trout up in Canada.
Right.
A little different deal right up there, some of those versus the smaller, like high headwater stream. So do you not have, brook trout, I guess historically, that's the thing, they've just evolved to the smaller streams in that area. You don't have really any brook trout that are lower in the system that are larger at all?
I don't think they were ever.
Yeah.
I might be wrong, but I don't know of them ever being lower. Like 4,000 feet and up is where you'll find most of the brook trout fishing. And I don't think they ever were low down like in Tuckasegee or Nantahala.
Yeah.
I think they were always held up to upper elevation.
Probably maybe too warm. But no, I hear what you're saying. We've had this conversation too about and this happened all over the country. You go out west to, Montana and Idaho areas where they're talking about, there's native fish, and it's a big constant, debate. Yeah. Do you get rid of all the giant brown trout and rainbows and then just bring back all the other native? And I think that it feels like there's like a balance there where there are some areas where you can keep the native fish, but you definitely, that wouldn't make sense to wipe out, right, what you guys are really enjoying.
Oh, yeah. There's plenty of high elevation streams, too, that are really small.
Yeah.
Where those fish are well protected, and there's a lot of them that are off limits to fish at all, for brook trout up high. So they have a good range. I think right now they've kind of hit a good balance.
Yeah, cool. Nice.
Myself, I mean, I remember years ago, a good friend of mine that was a park biologist had a local meeting here in my town, and he called me to ask if I'd come to the meeting because he knew there'd be a lot of opposition. I didn't really know what he was going to talk about. And yeah, there was a lot of opposition. They were talking about wanting to come down lower on a lot of these much bigger streams and rotenone to poison off all the invasives and stock 4-inch fish. And of course, the local people went wild.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And I can't say that I blame them. This area is $170 million a year in fly fishing. That's a 2019 study done by the Wildlife Commission. And when you have that kind of a dependency on tourism, and there's like 400 or 500 guides here now in Western Carolina. So yeah, that would be devastating to the economy if they went ahead and did that,
Yeah, totally. No, I get that for sure. Well, it looks like, on the surface, like you're in this really amazing part. I mean, what are the people? I'm just kind of curious about this. Are you seeing people coming in there, new people moving to the area? It seems like such an amazing place. What is, I guess there's that question, but also, what do you love about just living in Bryson City? What's the, great thing about kind of that area?
Well, I taught whitewater a long time as well, like kayaking, canoeing for NOC, Nantahala Outdoor Center. And my wife worked there for years as well. And so it's really just a community of all, it's like an outdoor mecca. And NOC employs about 600 people. And they always had inns like back in the early years. It started in 1972. And they were always really big, like Patagonia, even when you call customer service at Patagonia, they're all friends that used to work here on the river.
Oh, wow.
So when Patagonia would have layoffs back in the 80s, early 90s, those people would come work at NOC. So it was just like this community, because the town's only 1,000 people. And like I said, there's 600 river people that came from all over the world. to work here. So a big part of this community is that river community. That's why I like it. I mean, that's why I stay here. A lot of the friends that I worked with in the mid 80s when I moved here, it's just, I don't know of anywhere else that's like that, that's quite like this anywhere in the country.
Right. And you have beautiful weather, right? I mean, your weather throughout the year is pretty awesome too, right?
Yeah. I mean, climate change stuff going on. We don't get near the snow. We used to get a lot of snow in the winter. Like I used to be able to put on cross country tele skis and just go cross country on the AT all winter long. And last year we didn't get but one dusting. It's been that way now for 22 years. It's just less and less, pre-tip. Even right now we're in severe drought. We've had like 5 months of no rain. And this is the lowest water levels that have ever been recorded here. Hopefully that's going to change soon. I think come middle of winter we'll start maybe getting some rain again, but the water levels are lower than I've ever seen here right now.
Skwala Fly Fishing, combining advanced materials with fishing-focused, purpose-built design. Skwala waders, jackets, shirts, pants, and insulation are made for us. To help Wet Fly Swing listeners right now, Skwala is offering a 10% discount on your next order. Just visit skwalafishing.com and use the coupon code WetFlySwing10 at checkout. That's Skwala, SKWALA. Gear for us, the serious angler. What is it like summertime? Are you getting some pretty hot weather as well?
Not really. Like we're probably cooler. Like for all the people that live around here, like Raleigh, Atlanta, some of the bigger metropolitan areas, those are all like, Atlanta's only 2 hours away south of here. And, they'll do their big Western trip to Montana. And it's like, this has been affecting Montana for a long time as well. Because I've gone out there every year since back in the 60s.
Huh.
And you go out to Montana and look at the water temp on half the rivers come July, and it's actually colder water living back here.
Right.
So our water stays in better condition. I mean, our water never got in the upper 60s this year. And I mean, Montana, you get up into 75. If you're on the Yellowstone or I don't care where you are. I mean, the Madison, they got like hoot owl operations because Montana's gotten hotter and hotter the last 20 years. But anymore, I'm not even, is that to want to go out there unless it's up into British Columbia or somewhere, because I'd rather fish British Columbia personally. I like it better up there.
Yeah, up in BC. Where do you head up? What are you fishing for up there in BC?
Well, I like the bull trout fishery off the Kootenai, and I like to go up in the mountains. There's, you go up in the mountains around Fernie. I love it all around Fernie, and there's just so much good water, and they don't seem to have the heat problem like lower, like in Wyoming and Montana. And it's just changed a lot. Like in my lifetime, I've seen Montana change. We never had to worry about water temps in Montana really until the last 15 years. And so, yeah, I just think that a lot of times, people think going somewhere else is going to be better. And like a lot of times I look where I live and I'm thankful that we have cold water like year round,
Yeah, it seems like you're in this really cool place. This is awesome.
It's been fun raising two boys here. They started off pretty young around the youth clinics and for like Team USA kids, like all the youth clinics are out of here.
Oh, really?
As well. Yeah, this is where they do all the training for them. And so they've been at those since they were babies. And I mean, now they're 17 and 14 years old. So it's kind of fascinating to me. Like we'll be out and then they'll remember stuff back when they were kids, hearing one of us talk about it at one of the training camps, and then I'm always shocked. I'm like, man, they were listening.
Huh. Right.
So a lot of stuff rubs off just from them being at all those when they were little that kind of surprises me because it wasn't like I was teaching them specifically, at that time.
Right. But you are a casting instructor, right? You have kind of that certification.
Yeah. That's what I do the most on the road is talk about casting because that's usually the easiest thing. That's the lowest hanging fruit in the sport to fix,
Yeah.
Once people get that fixed, of course, there's a lifetime of stuff that goes along with that, but I think that that's the easiest to attain and the biggest demand, I guess, too, on the road. You know what I mean? It's like people getting ready to drop $20,000 to go to the Seychelles or the Christmas Islands and they can't cast 30 feet, then there's your clients,
Yeah, exactly. No, casting is obviously huge, and it's especially for people getting into it. A lot of people think, it's a big block for new people thinking it's so hard. And I want to talk about some casting for sure today.
Yep.
Yeah, so but let's hear home waters first, and then we'll jump into some casting. So remind us again, what are the rivers you're guiding out there mostly? What's your focus there?
Well, I spend a lot of time on I like the wild trout water, and I help start the delayed harvest in North Carolina back in 91 with the Wildlife Commission. The first one was on the upper Nantahala River, and the second one was at Tuckasegee River in Webster, North Carolina, which is about 20 miles north of here where the college is. And we were teaching a college program up there at Western Carolina back in the early 90s. And that's why that program was put there, because one of the District 9 commissioners, there was only like 7 of them at the time, and he was from Silva. And so he said, well, you need a place right here for a DH. And I'm like, yeah, I do, because he was on the board. He just mentioned it to the board in Raleigh. And the next thing I knew, we had the second one up there at the college. Now there's 37. So,
oh, wow.
I mean, they're all up in, from Georgia line up to Virginia in the mountain.
And what are these? There's 37. What are the 37? What are these?
Delayed harvest, which means they'll plant fish from October up until first Saturday in June. And that way, it's a big yahoo for all the, people learning new techniques. It's just a lot of stock fish. Like the river below my house is, it's got wild fish in it too. But, by the time they stock it through the winter months, there's about 28,000 fish in 2 mile area. So it makes it a lot easier for people doing floats. And of course, it's also turned into like Disneyland.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, but it's like, that's one of the drawbacks, isn't it?
Oh, right. Just more people on the river.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because with that much stocking, and of course, when people are, learning techniques, it's great for that. But I'd much rather guide on, like, we've got some fantastic wild water, which I'd rather do most of the work. I work a lot on the freestones.
Oh, okay. And these are these freestones that are, what are the species in the freestones, or how's it different than, say, where they're stocking all those fish? Mostly
rainbow and brown trout. We got some great brown trout wild fish that have been in here since the mid-30s. And that's real rewarding. Of course, the casting, the canopy, the currents is much, it's just a lot more technical attributes, because a lot of times it's like casting inside of a cave, It's like totally rounded with trees all around you. So it's like, for the variety of free-form casting of using a lot of spade cast varieties with single hand, this just makes it a lot funner. I enjoy it for that reason. And so what it's done, in a way, it's a good thing for people there's a lot of local people here that have started, fly fishing that are up in their 80s. Good friends of mine that I fish with that are that age, that have been doing this all their life. And it keeps by having those DH programs, in a way, it's a great thing, because it puts people on those and takes all the pressure off the good wild water,
Right. Is that the water are you floating typically in a raft most of the time out there?
If we're on the Tuckasegee or the Nantahala, yeah, we're in a raft usually, because it's just easier to cover a lot of water. But the freestone water, I'm wading.
Yeah, you're wading. How do you spell that? How do you spell the Tuckasegee?
Tuckase, then Gee.
Yeah, Tuckasegee. Yeah, that's right. Tuckasegee. Perfect.
Yeah, and that means land of the turtle in Cherokee. That's what it translates to.
Land of the turtle. There you go.
So for all those deadheads out there, they'll like that.
Yeah. So that's good. So that's like one of your big rivers. You're floating that river, and when you're doing that floating, are you fishing kind of out of a boat? What's the technique you would be doing there?
Oh yeah, we're fishing out of a boat. Yeah, we do a lot of different, depending on the time of year. Really, right now we're doing a lot of dry fly, just because the fish have really looked up well. We've had a lot of good midge and blue wing hatches pretty regular. But in the springtime, I would say most of the time I'm pulling triple wet flies. And I like fishing wets quite a bit. And in the spring, that's probably the most productive technique.
Oh, okay. Is this like a wet flies, kind of like a Davy Watton sort of style, where you're cast that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, Davy's been out here a bunch. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll fish like a Muddler Daddy up top, like real similar to what he's doing. Or a lot of times I'll fish like old Irish wets, like Didios, Kate McLaren's, things like that in the spring for hatches. Just triple wets, and it depends on the, light condition and all that. If it's really a bright day, then I'll be on a DI3, DI5, somewhere like that to put those 3 wets down. And if it's real overcast, then I'll probably be throwing an intermediate or a floater.
Oh, so you're the DI3, DI5, now explain that a little more.
Just for the sink rate of the line, so that they're going to sink bigger.
Oh, just the sinking. Yeah. Gotcha. 3 inches. Yeah. So you're putting on a sinking line with wet flies, and is that how then you're stripping them in? Yeah,
I just like that method better, because I find it really boring. I know most of the places around the country, including here, they rig up and they'll put, a pattern, and there'll be like a big float. And I can't do that at 60 years old. Float down a river and watch a float. I don't think I'd stayed in this that long if that's what I did, because I find it very boring to watch a float. You know what I mean? It's like the problem with it is it's not covering much water. And with the wet fly game, you can swing and cover vast amounts of water very efficiently and quick, to cover what you're trying to cover. And you're showing it to a lot higher number of fish. So by the end of the day, I think the numbers speak for themselves.
Yeah. So you're swinging wet flies, and you're doing all sorts of different things with the wet flies depending on the conditions.
Yeah, I mean, we'll fish them upstream, we'll fish them across. There's a lot of different tactics with it, but I mean, a lot of times we'll fish them upstream and dead drift them back on a floater.
Yeah.
During a hatch. And there's just a lot of ways, to do that. And then it also opens up the opportunity to work a little bit with their casting instead of watching somebody lob it.
Oh, yeah.
The length of the rod over the side of the boat. Of course, that'd be tough to do, man. I don't see how people do that every day. I really don't. That's why most guides won't make it to 60 and still be guiding,
Right.
It's because they're going to get burnt out, man. There's got to be more than that. And it's like, it's not just here, it's all over the country. But I just think that, we try to preach that a lot during the guide schools too.
Yeah.
About teaching the core components. People need to go away better than when they showed up. And to do that means you're going to have to address casting, line control techniques, duties of the line hand for pulling off drift, hook set, playing fish, and landing fish. And I feel like every trip, all of my guides, they're preaching those 5 core components every trip, because people need to go away, understanding a little more than when they showed up. If all they did was lob a bobber and didn't get a dissertation on anything, even though they got a bobber every time it's going to be tough for them to do well, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I hear you. No, that's a great point. Is that, I mean, there's a lot to fly fishing, and to keep it interesting, I think diversity is kind of one of the things I found. I still struggle at casting. I've done it all, but I think I still struggle at a lot of stuff. I still have a lot to learn. It seems like that's what's exciting about it, that you all know, you got this lifetime to keep learning, which is cool. Talk about the guide school a little bit. So this is really interesting, because there are a few, I've heard about some guide schools around the on the podcast, but what is yours? Talk about what it is and what people would learn there.
Well, it goes over those 5 components quite a bit, and then it goes into each tactic of, dry fly. There's a day spent on dry fly fishing, a day just on wet fly fishing. And wet fly and stream are really just pretty similar to be. I know everybody thinks, well, one's a bait fish and one's a small insect, but let's face it, as far as the two things, they're actually, I look at them pretty similar.
Yeah.
To say that they're a speed change, to mix up speed and to mix up a direction change, is really the same thing, isn't it? Whether we're talking a small streamer or a wet fly, I could care less which one's on the end of the line, because I'm going to fish it pretty much the same. And I know a lot of people try to act like streamer is this entire different entity, and I don't buy it. I've streamer fished plenty in my life, and I mean, I've tied a lot of articulated stuff before articulated was cool back in the 70s.
Yep.
And it's not anything new. I mean, it just keeps getting rebranded. It's like rebranded for patterns and whatever reason. But speed change and direction change will still be the 2 universal things that make them highly related for wet fly and streamers. So there's a day on that. There's a day on rowing.
Oh, nice.
And the first day of the school is all on casting. It's all on improving their casting, as well as how they're going to help improve other people's casting. So we spend the first day just on that with every school. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun watching them grow over the week. And a lot of concept and strategy. That's really the biggest thing, though, I think the schools bring for people. And it's like Davey says it best when he was here talking around the patio, Watton. He goes, there's just no way somebody could start at 40 and expect to get like the amount of strategy and stuff that somebody like Watton's accumulated in a lifetime being on the water, or what we're teaching in the school. I mean, there's just not enough hours. You'll never get it alone. There's just, people aren't going to have the time to get it, is what I'm saying. So it makes sense, instead of, to get some training, hopefully, where they enjoy, deeper enrichment of the sport down the road, where they have a clue what they're trying to do. The big thing that's dangerous about it is when they don't even have a clue what it is they're trying to do, from watching YouTube or something. YouTube's not teaching those things. YouTube's not teaching strategy, is it?
No.
I think it has a lot to be desired still, from what I see on YouTube anyway.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
That's where I think, like, specialized individual training makes a big difference.
Yep. No, this is really great. I think so. And so you have this school basically, and this is kind of like a week long, like 5 days sort of thing, 4 to 5 days.
Yeah. We run, I think this year ended up running 9 schools this year. We just finished up one a couple of weeks ago for November. And yeah, next year I just ended up putting the new dates up. And then that's part of what the new dates for 24 up on the site at flyfishingguideschool.com. And big part of getting it is just keep doing it. And on the road, a lot of the people funnel in from, out West Coast and Northeast from the number of shows. I've been doing a lot of shows since 93, and I think that gets them curious, because a lot of people have never seen that. Every time you got a new person, it's their first time at a show, and you get the opportunity to talk for an hour on the casting pond and show like different curves and piles and all kinds of varieties of tuck cast angles. And it's like, man, then they realize all they've been doing is throwing it out with no intent. Then they start realizing, man, there's some meaning to this madness, And that's what gets their curiosity. So I think everybody, once they decide to commit to growing, whether it's casting or a technique fishing, it first has to come from them. It really does. But what makes it come from them is you got to get them curious. And you get them curious by showing them there's other ways.
Yeah, showing them some of those cool casts. So that's kind of part of what you do. You're out there still doing a lot of the show season. Are you doing, how's that look this next year in 24? What shows are you hitting?
Yeah, it's going to be busy. It's going to start out, I'm going to do Denver first. That's become a fantastic show. It's just grown so much over the last 5 years that I think it's probably the best show in the world now as far as attendance and number of people there. And then Edison, New Jersey, Atlanta, Pleasanton, California in the Bay Area, and then the Midwest Fly Fishing Show up there in Michigan. That's the 5 that I'm going to do this winter.
Yep.
Then there's a lot of little club events and things too, but those bigger shows are. I really enjoy those. Those are a lot of fun. Also get to see your friends from Europe and people that I don't get to see during the year.
Right. So at those shows, are you typically doing casting demonstrations, or are you mixing things up, or what do you do there?
Well, I do tying, I do casting, do a lot of classes, like casting classes. We've done some classes like just on like rigging, things like that. I mean, just for talking about rigging, like for king salmon versus, trout fishing versus, just those go over like knots and rigging and where do we put the weight and why do we change it quite a bit, to figure out what rig's going to work best for this situation. So it just gives people options so they can go down just like, have I tried this? Yes. If I tried that, and if the answer is no, then they have another way to rig, for trying. A lot of people don't know how to rig a drop shot rig.
Right.
And it's like, that's one of the simplest things in the world, but they hadn't heard it,
Yeah. What is that drop? Give us the quick drop shot. What is that rig?
Well, that's like what you see a lot out west on western rivers where people are floating in a boat and you have a suspension device up top, and then they'll have their nymph rig, and the way that they rig the weights to be ticking the bottom but not catching the bottom. So you spread your weights out, on the bottom, on the point, and you separate them rather than put like one big ball of lead. You put a whole bunch of smaller pieces of lead so you can get it fine-tuned. The goal being to keep a fly exactly in the zone being the boundary layer where the fish are actively eating. And that's really all about getting the rig right, Once it's balanced to where it needs to be, that's the difference of doing really well and struggling, So the rigging classes have been a lot of fun too, but I enjoy teaching the casting classes the most. That's what I do the most at all those shows on the road. I really enjoy those because you'll get 10 people and you get them for a couple, 2.5, 3 hours. And the other one I enjoy a lot at those venues for Denver and Edison and Atlanta and Pleasanton is Gary and I have been doing those for a number of years, and Gary Borger. And we have an 8-hour advanced line control class, and that goes over all the curves and piles and basic default casts, distance casting. It covers the whole gamut in 8 hours. And that's been really a lot of fun to teach.
Right. So you, Gary's probably going to be going to the show these next year too? Yeah,
we'll do all those the day before the shows begin. We do it on a Thursday.
Okay.
So the shows usually for the 3-day shows, most of them are 3-day shows, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'll teach the 8-hour class on the Thursday before, and they can find that info on the flyfishingshow.com website.
Yeah, that's right. And didn't Gary last couple of years move near you, right, to your neck of the woods from the west?
No, he wanted to. He wanted to move here.
Yeah.
He was up in Wisconsin, and he moved out to Portland. He lives out near Portland, and that's where Jason lives, is Portland.
Oh, in up north?
Northwest, yeah, Portland, Oregon.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, so wow. Okay, yeah, I haven't talked to him in a little while. So he's back out. So he's in Portland now. He went from, where was he? He was in kind of the Montana area, right, for a while, and then moved. I thought he moved to the East Coast for a bit, didn't he?
No, he was up in I think Wausau, Wisconsin.
Oh, that's right.
And when he retired from being a college professor, he moved out to be closer to the grandbabies and Jason.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so he's been working, fixing up a house, and he's done with it now, I think, all the big projects. And yeah, that's a real pretty area, too. I like that area around the Northwest. It's a fun area to visit.
Yeah, that's where we are. Or that's where physically I am. I travel. We do we have our own kind of school program. We go around the country with the podcasts and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely, that's one of the things you think about it, as the climate is getting, more fires and stuff. Oregon's not a bad place to be because, especially as you get to the coast, is that, it's not as hot here and there's lots of rain. So we're not lacking with rain. That's one thing we have here.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
We used to always get, quite a bit of rain. When I moved here in the mid-'80s, this was like a temperate rainforest, similar to out where you live. Yeah. But it's really changed.
Like, what would you get? What would you get back in the 80s? How many inches of rain would you get per, say, year?
Like 110 inches a year.
Oh, wow. Wow. So that's exactly that's what the coast of Oregon gets, about that now, and maybe 100. So what do you get now per year?
Way less. I mean, we've been in severe drought. We've got fires all around here right now. And I think this year, like 55 to 60 inches is what it's been the last 10, 15 years. So we're going to see a lot of species diversification happen with, this is the highest area in the world of deciduous trees.
Oh.
Even freshwater fish, this is one of the highest diversity. I think the Amazon headwaters is one of the only other places in the world with as many species of darters and daces here. So we have a lot of species of everything. Insects, we have the highest species of insects in the world for aquatic insects.
Wow.
So for entomologists that want to study bugs, I mean, this is where a lot of the really good programs are at schools like in the Southeast that study like this area.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, there's a lot of different insects. So, yeah, we don't worry about, there's like 700 species of caddisflies. So, I mean, we don't worry about,
you're not going to lose those.
Tying 700 caddisflies, as you can imagine. We just look at size, shape, and color.
Back here with Daniel from Northern Rockies Adventures, and he's going to share some more Northern BC fishing tips. How you doing, Daniel?
Doing great, and today we're talking trout. Pretty excited.
Yeah, it's always good to talk trout talk. So today's going to be, the headline is the trifecta of trout. So let's talk about what the trifecta is up to Northern BC, where we're going to be heading to meet you.
So I really like what everyone thinks of trout, rainbow trout. That's just kind of the main species everyone's fishing up here. But what's interesting is we have two other species. So we have the bull trout, which was actually it's a landlocked Dolly Varden. And then we have the lake trout, which is actually in the char family. And probably the most underappreciated of the two here, or of the three. It's such a variety of trout. They all have unique angling opportunities and experiences. It's pretty fun to target all of them.
If anybody wants to follow up further on this, we'll send them out to nradventures.com/wetflyswing. And we also have an episode coming up with you December 20th, 2023. This will be episode 540, where we're going to talk everything trout and just everything you have going up there in Northern Rockies. So until then, Daniel, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Dave. Pleasure.
Well, I want to talk, you mentioned it, the casting at the shows, and your guide school, that's a big part of it. And casting is just always a struggle for, there's always, myself included. But how do you break that down? If you're taking somebody in, let's say it's this guide school or really anybody you're trying to coach, they come in, they've got some skills maybe in casting. What would you tell somebody listening here? Are there a few tips you would give somebody to help, kind of up their game a little bit on the casting?
I would say first would be to get, I think the first most important thing really would be to get a default that'll serve you for a lifetime. Get a basic default stroke and learn to understand it backwards and forwards. For the default stroke, before you add the kitchen sink of all the advanced stuff, because we can't do any of the advanced stuff if the default is dysfunctional. Most people's stroke is dysfunctional because they've learned it being self-taught. And I'm not self-taught. I didn't just wake up one day and could cast. I had lessons with Jim Green when I was 15. I spent a week with him out in Idaho. I've spent a lot of time with a lot of world-class teachers over the years and teaching with them and just seeing how they teach and what they say and how that helps formulate like who you are. And the good stuff, you go ahead and put it in your bag of tricks. The stuff that you don't want to use, then you might not. But it's like there's tons of good information from, world-class teachers out there in casting. And I don't mean the free lesson in the parking lot with somebody that just started. I'm talking about get a default, somebody that actually knows it really well to teach it.
Yeah, like pay somebody to get a lesson sort of thing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm not saying all the free parking lot lessons might be flawed, but
Yeah.
chances are they are. If they've only been doing it for a year, then I would imagine it's flawed.
You're not going to get your value. Well, you do get value. I mean, I always think of it like a quote I think about just in general, in business in general, whatever. Invest in yourself. I feel like that's always a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It just makes good sense, It's like I say, like I've done a lot of lessons this last month of people that are going to exotic places. They're going to drop like some serious coin.
A lot of cash.
Yeah, and they come and to be honest, even that's the wrong approach. So maybe even though I've done a lot of those over the years, the last 40 years, but it's the wrong approach. It's like I play Celtic fiddle and guitar and a lot of different instruments, and I've been playing music stuff since I was a 5-year-old kid. There's no way somebody could come in a day to go, hey, Dave, I need a tune-up. By the way, I want to play Celtic fiddle. And you think I'm going to come away playing Celtic fiddle in an 8-hour lesson?
No.
So what I'm saying by that is for those that think they're going to get a tune-up before they drop $20,000 on an exotic trip, that's a joke.
Yeah.
Like it should have been a work in progress their entire lifetime. And I don't know. I just think that, I'll still try to help them, but will it really soak in? Are they really going to double haul and throw a 100-foot cast all day long and look cool?
Yeah.
Chances are they're not, because there's going to be a ton of stuff they need to go work on and put it into their method,
Right.
And my point is, it's just kind of funny when it's like, Dave, I need a tune-up. I just got this rod and I want to learn to fly cast, and I'm going to, Christmas Island next week.
I know, with the wind and all the conditions and on a boat and everything.
Yeah, so it needs to be in somebody's. Really, the best casters I know out there. It's so much a part of them, and they're geeks about it, just like I'm a geek about it. I like to get in the yard still with my boys, and we'll throw 2 or 3 days a week.
Yeah,
15, 20 minutes playing games.
Well, what does that look like? Walk us through some of that. You're sitting out there, your kids, and what do those games look like? What are you guys doing?
We'll put a target out a lot of times, and we'll just have a contest on throwing 90-degree curve left and right, using different methods of curves. There's a lot of different recipes for throwing those types of curves. Then we'll just pick one and say, we're going to do it from an aerial mend. Reach out, reach back, and who can lay it closest to the target, where the fly target is, plus where the 90-degree angle is. So now we've got 2 targets. It's not just a singular target. See, most people think of targets as accuracy as being straight to and from, of saying, hey, Dave, hit the target, like straight ahead.
Right.
Well, if you think about it, it's very rare on moving water that we present anything straight ahead.
That's true.
So, 90% of dry fly fishing is always a curve or a pile. Very rare do we throw a dry fly dead straight and hope for the best. So these kind of games that I'm talking about develop what we actually use when we fish on water that moves,
Yep.
So that's why we play those kind of games. Then we'll do it, maybe over and under powered curves. And it's just like they've been doing those games since they were little. So,
yeah,
they can, the 14-year-old he might come out there and school everybody.
Right. Yeah.
He's like, he's pretty adept at it. So it just matters who's throwing, but it's fun to do that still, just to have these types of games. But that's why I say the default about how do we power, and this isn't like Mac or Gary Borger saying this. What Gary and I were really good at is taking all the stuff, and he used to run the Fenwick schools with Jim Green and Mel Krieger for years back in the 70s. When I talk about default and teach casting on the road, it's not like how a lot of instructors years ago were like, man, this is Dave's method, or people try to take credit for how they move, and that's ridiculous. That's just so ridiculous. It's not even funny. But the reality of it is, what we did is George Selwyn Marriott in England back in the 1860s dominated the world, best caster England ever produced, and he won like 30 world championships in a row. And he had to figure it out, because fly casting as we know it today didn't really start till 1856. So when somebody was that adept to win 30 in a row, that's kind of like what Steve's done in America, Steve Rajeff. That, here's my point. What we teach about default is what the best in the world have done since 1860. And what we've done is taken Frank Steele from Chicago Casting Club, Marvin Hedges from the Portland Club. What we've done is look at all the world's greatest casters and said, you know what? They all did it the same way. And that's what we teach. And that's why we teach it.
Yeah.
So there's dysfunction if it's away from that.
Right. How do you find that, let's say somebody out there is somewhere in the country, pick the state, pick the province, whatever, and they want to get to that default? Like, how do they find the right place to go to get that started? Do you think, what's your recommendation?
Man, there's a lot of instructors, just like there's a lot of doctors, you know?
Yeah, like the FFI. I mean, is the Fly Fishers International sort of thing a good starting point since they have? Is that the default? Is that what they teach?
Yeah, I mean, if they're starting out, they have a thing about finding an instructor, you know, so they could go on there and find a CI, MCI. Yeah, I mean, two-handed instructors, two-handed MCI.
Could they do that without actually going through the certification? But maybe it's just a person listening here that just wants to up their casting game. Maybe they don't have a fly shop nearby.
Yeah, that's on there for the public. But it's just under. If you just type in FFI, find an instructor, it'll bring you to the webpage where all you do is type in the country you're in, the state you're in, and it'll bring in the people that are close to you. You know what I mean? And then that's the best way, I think, to do it.
That's it. Yeah, and then find somebody, and maybe even if you don't work with them, just chat with them. Say, hey, this is what I need to do. Maybe I'm a beginner. Maybe I've been struggling, but I want to get my game to the default level and get there, right? So that's it.
Yeah, I mean, that would definitely be a good first step. Now, everybody's default's a little different too, though. So I mean, it gets tricky.
Yeah, the default, right. What is the?
I mean,
yeah,
somebody else's default might be different, is what I'm saying. So I think you got to find something that's on the same. Yeah, that's a tricky one actually. That's hard to answer.
And by default, what you kind of mean is the mechanics, the 10 to 2, whatever you call it, is all at some standardized level, sort of thing.
Well, yeah, like when it started out in 1856, even today, people still try to go back and revert. But let's just say it like this: there's only 3 methods.
Yeah, what was that in 1856? Why was that the starting point?
That's where the rod and silk line got developed in England, and the bamboo rod was, the first 6-sided bamboo rod was made by Samuel Philippi up in Pennsylvania. That was the first time they had a rod that was other than Tenkara, because everything before that was just a pole with some string tied on the end. They didn't cast it. I mean, you could cast it, but you didn't shoot line or do any of the other things as we know today. You know what I mean? So Tenkara, just like tie some horsehair on the end of a greenheart rod and hope for the best. That's what fishing was before 1856. So when it came about, that's where a lot of things started to change. So when they started to figure this out, some of them tried it with just their wrists, hold everything still and just move the wrist back and forth. Sure, you could cast a little ways like that. You might go out 20 feet, 30 feet. That might be all you wanted. Then there was others that used the bicep and tricep, moving the whole, pivot and the forearm up and down. And then if they could. Some of them even tried to move the forearm up and down with the shoulder being static. And then they add a little wrist with it too. And then they go a little further. But if you really want to get a default stroke, full arm casting is where it's at. Like the full arm being involved, which means the shoulder has to lift the rod up and down. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For default, like that's what the best in the world have always done. They use the full arm. So if you gave a rod out to 100 people and said, figure it out, same thing would happen even today. Probably 30% would try it with just the wrist, 30% would try it with bicep and tricep, and 30% would try the full arm.
Yeah.
So that's kind of fun. I mean, that is kind of the truth, though. They'd probably be right at the same point as when they started it back then again.
Right.
But the biggest thing you see about defaults that have a lot of issues is really boils down to rod load. If they don't understand how to bend the rod into the cork, then they got a problem. It's that simple. So rod load, yeah, it's a cool concept, and everybody knows what it means to bend the rod. Yet some can bend it way more efficient. So that's what everybody wants. So that's why they need a lesson. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if I say, okay, here's a longer cast into a 20-knot wind,
yep,
then that understanding that fact of bending the rod into the cork is the only way that's going to happen. The only way we're going to make the distance is to be able to do that, not just know that's what we need to do, but to be able to implement it.
Right. And how do you implement that? How do you bend the rod into the cork if you have to make a farther cast into the wind?
Oh, just by full arm casting. I mean, by technically doing all those steps correctly. And there's a lot of steps. Like, how do we move the hand? What's the path of the hand? The coordinate, like it shows, what you'll see a lot of people do is the hand will be going back and forth, like chest height back and forth, like an accordion. How's that going to rotate a rod? Does that make sense? So that would be an inefficient method of bending it into the cork. Because if you push the rod back and forth, like you see so many people do, even out here on the river where I live, what happens is they're just getting a little bit of tip and mid-flex, but zero bending in the butt section. So if the butt section's never getting loaded, what's that do? Just makes you work harder, but you're still not getting the result you want. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, you got to use, like you're saying, your whole arm. So if you're doing a cast that's 20 feet out, 15 feet out, you can just kind of do that however you want to do it. But if you're having to make a 60, 80-foot long cast, you got to use your whole arm, almost your whole body to really get the bend into the cork. Is that the case?
Yeah, it just makes it a lot easier because what happens is, I mean, that's really kind of over the years, that's probably the most asked question I get on the road is people will say, Dave, I'm a great 30-foot caster. And I'm like, great, this cat can cast. And then in the very next sentence, they go, but I can't seem to cast 40 when it's windy.
Right.
Well, chances are you're not a good 30-foot caster. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, let's be serious here. Because if you were a good 30-foot caster, you shouldn't have no problem going way further.
Yeah.
If your mechanics were sound. So what happens is, this is the part people miss that I don't think people understand this. Anybody can throw. We could wad the whole 90-foot lineup and throw it like a baseball and still get close to 30. So good technique, bad technique, whatever, will all work at 20, 30 feet because that's really remedial stuff, isn't it?
Yep.
So let's talk about middle distance, like 40, 50 feet. Now we got to have a concept about loops, what loops do, how they propagate, have a parallel fly leg and rod leg. I mean, those need to be parallel. Because what happens if it's big dome-shaped on the top? It's going to go out and pile when you might be wanting to straighten it. So we got to start to get a clue about loop formation and what it is to throw a nice, efficient loop. And the only way you get that is by, I would say practice, but here's the thing. We used to always hear that when I was a kid. Practice doesn't mean anything. Because if you're practicing the wrong default over and over and over, I would argue the fact that it's probably doing you way more harm.
Yeah.
Because you've put it in your muscle memory, that much deeper for the myelination. The brain tells you to make a cast and you go right back into that default, which is something you're trying to abandon. If it's not the right default. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I had a group on Saturday. This is funny. They were two twin 15-year-old girls. And the son runs against my oldest boy. He runs track and cross country, but this son was from up in Boone, and the daddy was with him. And man, it was such a joy. They were all so trainable and moldable. Like at 15, the girls were just like rock stars. I had two guides on it. But anyway, I looked down the stream after about an hour, and they're both throwing like 40, 50-foot perfect textbook loops.
Yeah.
These are beginners.
Oh, wow.
They're throwing better than most people with poor defaults that have been doing the sport 20, 30 years because they didn't get taught how to throw. So it's a beautiful thing when you look down and see two 15-year-old kids that just took it up and they can throw beautiful loops and they get it.
Yeah.
But they're starting then with the right thing. So my point is it can be a dangerous thing to practice something that's something you're trying to be rid of.
When you have the kids on there, what's the first thing they're brand new, or anybody brand new? What's the first thing you do? What do you do with a brand new person?
I'll just go over, we don't have like an 8-hour thing to do a casting lesson. So now we got to condense the highlight stuff in a shorter period of time, because we spent about probably 20, 30 minutes up on the land before we ever went down to the river. So then we're just basically going over, the casting. Even like say it's a 2-hour class or a 1-hour class, now we got to do it in 20 minutes. And kids are sharp that way. You do it by pantomime. There's a lot of tricks. There's a lot of teaching tricks. You can use cues, props, pantomime the motion where you go through the motion without even having a rod in your hand. You can correct all mistakes right then and there.
Right.
Then after you see what you like with just moving their hand back and forth, then you stick a rod in their hand and then they're casting. So kids are real trainable that way. So, that's what I always enjoyed about the college programs, teaching the college-age kids that were new or coaching the youth kids on Team USA. It's a real joy working like that. Young people, they're rock stars.
Yeah, totally. No, that's awesome. And what about a couple other things on the casting? So you hear a lot about acceleration. How does that fit into this? How does somebody listening now, if they want to, is that a big problem on acceleration, or what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, usually, we're always saying in these lessons, like less is more, for the reason that people use way too much effort. And so one of the demo things I'll do on the road, if listeners are like close to those cities for the shows, but one thing I'll always demo on a pond, because people work so hard at this, is if you make a back cast that has good loop integrity, it's got some sufficient tension in the loops, I'll make a back cast, and then coming forward, I won't do anything with my arm. I'll just bend at my hips and just move forward 6 inches to break inertia of that back cast, and the whole thing will turn over out front 50 feet with no effort at all. And once people see it, then the reason I like doing that always on the road is to get people to chill out and quit working so hard. Because the harder they work, the more it's hurting them than helping them,
Yep.
And it's like, but that's a hard thing because men have a bigger issue, with that, because we're taught in sport, like, if you're going to throw a ball further, what do you got to do? You got to throw it faster and harder. But in casting, it doesn't work that way because you form a loop. The loop's all about how the loop works. How does it unroll? So one thing that people miss out on, I think, is the fact that the fly is always accelerating. Once you create a loop, if the fly's starting to travel somewhere with the loop, the fly's going faster and faster the whole time. Everything else you've done in your life slows down, but this is going faster. So men have a hard time realizing that the fly accelerates, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And women seem to get it quicker because they don't try to overpower it, everything with muscle. So it's really more of a timing game, not a muscle game. That's why women are way better casters on average in less than even on a trip. I mean, I've been guiding since 85 for a living with schools and guide trips. I used to run 300 plus days a year. And hardly ever have I had a couple where it's a husband-wife where the husband did better than the wife ever.
Right.
So that ought to tell men something, that when they bring their wife and think that she's totally new and doesn't know anything, well, let me tell you, he'll be in for a rude awakening before the day's over.
Right.
Because it's always that way.
It's always that way.
She catches the most fish. She casts better. She threw less knots. It goes on and on.
Yeah.
Then he starts realizing, I just want to be as good as her. But it's also because the sports. I really think a lot of it is sports. I think men are indoctrinated when something isn't going well to do it harder. And that's what messes a lot of guys. It'll take them many years before they really realize that,
Yeah.
Because they're going to have it. Even though they hear it, it's going to take them a long time to implement it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, gotcha. What are some of those casts that you do out there that people might want to know? You hear about, you mentioned a couple of them, the curve cast, the tuck cast. What are some of the things that you think are key casts you should know?
Well, I'd say the biggest thing is just dealing with the external surroundings, of trees and cover. Because we got a lot of trees, man. We've got some of the most heavily canopied area in the nation probably here to fish on these freestones. And so there's a lot of obstacles. So I would say the biggest thing is to break away then, once you learn a default, to move away from the default. So, I mean, I'll talk a lot on the road about learning to work the line in front of you, which means the fly never goes in back of you. So basically now we're talking about pickup varieties. We might use a circle, a figure eight, might just move the line side to side. But the dry fly or whatever we're throwing is always in front of me because it's so canopied that why would I want to take a risk on throwing it in back?
Right.
So then everything, a modified roll cast for the delivery, that might be 50 feet out, might be 40 feet out, but I fish in front of my body a lot.
Right. Like kind of the roll cast, the single space sort of stuff, single hand spay, that type of deal.
Well, there's a whole lot of single hand spay in this part of the country.
Yeah.
For the ones that are pretty good at fishing this part of the country without ever going in any trees. That's how we do it. So that's kind of a life changer. If they've been going back and forth to and from their whole life and then they come up on one of these real tight streams, I think they're going to have to be a lot of things that change.
Yeah. Where do you start with that, with the roll cast, the single hand spay, all that stuff with somebody? Is that an easy thing? Is that easier to teach than the back cast?
No, I think it's harder.
Yeah, it's harder.
No, I don't. I think it takes more time because most people's roll cast is not very hot. I mean, roll casting, people struggle with roll cast way more than you think. Most people can't roll cast more than about 20 feet. And I mean, they can't roll cast, like if you had triple wets and you asked them to roll cast 50 foot out, static, most people think that's a really hard thing to do on trips. So I think the roll cast is a big, like get out of jail free card for people. They can, if they're really good at roll casting, they can use that whenever, to straighten a line before they pick up a cast and maybe just to deliver a fly. But the roll cast doesn't work unless it's mechanically pretty close to sound, and that's the thing. So I think that the roll cast is one of those big things for this part of the country.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to, obviously casting. Where do you send somebody? Again, we're talking about, I guess the shows are a good place to go. Probably, but like we said, finding a local fly, shop or guide or somebody that can show you, that's kind of the starting point, right?
I don't know, man, because I think a lot of those people mess them up. I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's like they're there to sell gear, man. Let's face it.
Right.
I've been in education since I got out of college, writing articles, books. I mean, I've been in education my whole life. If I was totally different working at a shop trying to sell fly rods and flies and T-shirts, then chances are I'm just going to tell them what they need to close the sale. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm trying to close a sale here because we make money by selling stuff.
Yeah.
I don't have nothing to sell except education. So
yeah.
It's like that's what I chose to do because that's what I felt like developed relationships and long-term, lifetime clients and friends that you get to meet over and over. Because you brought them value, and I feel a lot better about that than just selling a rod,
Yeah, definitely. Well, you teach them, it's the same thing, right? Teach them how to fish, and they're going to come back. They're going to love it. They're going to have less problems and probably be a lifelong angler if you teach them how to do it the right way, as opposed to getting frustrated, right?
Oh yeah, and it makes your life a lot easier too, developing those people, because you might work them, 30, 40 times over a period of a decade or two, And so not only that is you're getting to do, from my perspective, you're getting to do more advanced things because they're a better angler, and that's why I think it's a lot of gratification watching their journey progress,
Yeah.
And that makes it fun, because then you can do cooler stuff on the water.
Right. Nice. Well, let's start to take it out of here. Just kind of, we've got a segment, our shout out segment here, and today I'm going to be thinking about kind of mentors. We've mentioned maybe a couple of them for you. Let's start there with on that is you mentioned Davey Watton. Are there a few mentors that you would highlight here that have helped you along the way that we haven't talked about yet?
Oh yeah, there's a ton of them across America, because I've been around the conclaves and gatherings and shows like that for a long time. I mean, I've worked at some point or another with all of them over the year.
Oh, and as FFI, have you been involved in that for quite a while? Are you still involved in that?
Oh yeah. I was a board of governor. I'm an L2 examiner still for testing events, and I do a lot of mentoring for CIs and MCIs and two-handed folks even now. I run 2 weeks a year for we just had a big testing event here. I think the Southeast, I put on the only Southeast testing event the last 4 years here.
And what is the testing event? Is that for people who want to be certified?
Yeah, that's where they're going to take their CI or MCI. So yeah, we have a specialized weekend class for those that are thinking about going down the path of teaching.
Yeah. Is that what it is on the certification? Are they pretty much most of those people going down the path of teaching? Are there anybody that goes there just because they want to get better at casting?
Yeah, some of them just want to collect a badge to say they did it, which is fine. Others are serious about wanting to become teachers. And I think a lot of times that people just want to improve their cast, because some of them have already worked and they've been professionals in some field or another, and they just want to do it for their own journey, which is fine too. But yeah, everybody's got different reasons why they do it, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. That's something people have talked about who have been through it, and we've heard some stories about how it's not the easiest thing to do, right? People maybe think they're a better caster than they are until they get into it, and they're like, wow, realizing the stuff you're talking about, they're not even close to the level they thought they were.
That's right. I think that's what it comes down to with those specialized classes is most people at first just want to say they can do it. The kinesthetically they can do the action without understanding. And of course, if you leave out the understanding, that's a dangerous thing for long-term growth. So I just think that by going over the material for the long-term growth has to be the understanding, even before they kinesthetically do it. Does that make sense? Because usually that's how people learn it the best. I mean, you can't train all these things to get a kinesthetic movement.
And what do you mean by that? Talk about the kinesthetic. What does that mean exactly?
I mean where everything's spot on, perfect.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now it's no big deal to pick up a line of 5-weight and throw it 120 feet.
Right.
That's kinesthetically starting to get perfect, right?
Yeah.
If they're still stuck at 55, there's probably a problem. Because all elite casters, pretty much all the elite accuracy. There's a ton of good distance casters in the world. The top 40 right now are throwing the 5-weight when they had it in Norway this last year at the World Games.
Yeah.
The top 40 people are between 138 and 144. That's amazing.
144 feet.
Yeah, with the 5-weight. Now, this isn't just like any old line. I'm saying it's all held to the same exact line. So that's how good these people at the higher level of things are. And it's so I just think that, yeah, once people have that kinesthetically, I'm sure that those people understand casting because they wouldn't have gotten there otherwise.
Yeah.
But somebody, there's somebody that worked with those people too to get them there.
Oh, yeah. What's stopping those people, say the Ray Jeffs sort of thing, stopping them from taking the next level and going 170 feet or whatever with a 5-weight?
Oh, just air drag, man. Nobody will ever go much past that. That's probably I don't think that'll get broken because you only have X amount of weight. Like a 5-weight line for 30 feet weighs 140 grains. The lines that we're using are for those big casting events is usually the expert distance line made by Scientific Angler. And they're a 120-foot line. And the heads on those lines, that's where the magic comes in. The head's only 77 feet long. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's only a finite amount of weight. So everybody's limited to the same amount of weight. And you got air drag acting on the loop. And so it all boils down then when those really big distances, the biggest thing to make a big event like with new world records broken is about the air density. So it's just like talking about like helicopters and airplanes and what's favorable air.
Oh, right.
You know, like why does a golf ball go further in Denver than it does at sea level?
Yeah, you got all that.
That kind of stuff. That's what happens with these kind of distances.
Right. But there's no super new, graphite technology, line technology that's going to change that. That's physics.
Oh, yeah. No, that won't change it. Yeah, it's just physics. So I'm saying that the limits to growth we've probably already close to approached them at this day and time.
That's pretty cool. So it sounds like you know a little bit of the history. Are you kind of a history buff in the fly fishing and fly tying? Is that something you think about a lot?
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I talk about on the road, like I'll do classes. I did a thing 2 years ago on the road for Strayer because that's one of the topics they wanted me to talk about. I'm like, fine. So we talked about Don gapping up on the Nipigon River with the muddler minnow, and we talked about all the history because, when I was a kid, there was only about 6 streamers that were popular.
Yeah.
And I mean, and everybody thinks they're all obsolete because there's cooler and better ones now. And that's totally not true. I mean, it's like you can still go out any river in the world and take 2 woolly boogers and smoke fish left and right. It's like, and that fly was from Kansas City, supposedly. Like as a kid, that was another Ozark fisherman from Kansas City, Missouri that came up with that back in 1928.
Oh, nice.
But no, so I know my history, like of patterns, like of the big common patterns. Nowadays, that's getting harder to do because there's just so much change of fur and a feather on something and whatever, and then everybody acts like it's something totally new. But I'll say this, those old school patterns that North America developed they'll never be obsolete. You know what I'm saying? It's not just because old dudes think they were good because they fished them all over the world. But I mean, those were good patterns and they were really good. I think there's a craze right now, Dave, where everybody's throwing too big of stuff.
Yeah.
I really do. Because I mean, I caught one here, like in the early years when I worked on the Nantahala a lot. I caught a brown that was on like all over Atlanta, Raleigh, Chattanooga, and it was like a 24-pound brown. I caught that on a size 10 muddler minnow.
Oh, wow. 24 pounds.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And it was a big deal, but everybody act like, well, it wasn't even a big fly. But I mean, you don't have to have a massive fly. I know people that fish a lot have seen like the power of a 26 midge and what it can do in the right water type, It's like big fish still going to eat snacks, and a small sculpin swimming by is a nice snack for a big fish,
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah, those big fish, they get to a certain size and they do eat a lot of other fish, but they're still opportunistic, right? So they'll still take whatever's easy for them.
They'll still take it. I think if they really want to see numbers, they're better off throwing, those smaller sizes like 10s, size 8s, that kind of stuff. I mean, stuff that's 4 and 5 inches long, I've had to do that so many times. And it's just because it's a trend the last few years. I remember one float trip last year, this bachelor party group, they all had like Cliff boxes just stuffed with 5-6 inch streamers. This is a funny story. And we're floating down. I'm like, and they wanted to throw it because they tied all these strings, and I don't blame them. But I mean, it's like 4 hours had gone by and they hadn't touched a fish.
Oh, wow.
And we're on a river with literally 16,000 fish per mile.
Damn.
And I said to them, y'all ready? You want to catch fish? You want to keep throwing this? And finally, I had to wait till they admitted they didn't want to throw it no more. And they said, yeah, let's catch fish. And I put on a size 14 wet fly, just a single wet fly, and both of them doubled the first cast. So, I mean, you want to catch fish, you got to fish stuff that's close to the size that makes fish want to eat. You know what I'm saying? There's a trend right now that's too big. People are throwing too big.
Yeah. Do you see that you see that in your area too?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just because it's getting all the love on social media and all these places, and I think that's part of it.
Yeah, well, and it's part of the whole, we just had Chad Johnson on, recently on the White River, and it's like, that whole thing, Kelly Gallup, right, the namings and all that stuff, and it's just, I think it sells, right, some of those funny names and all that stuff, and it works too, right, sometimes, but not everywhere.
Oh, it can work.
Yeah.
It's kind of like musky fishing then, though.
Yeah.
It's like, it's easier to go in there with smaller stuff and do well. I mean, just like the lakes up in the Northwest, like we'll throw a lot of like triple streamers that are smaller streamers in those big lakes, like in Canada. And you get some like huge, exceptional fish on those little size.
It's cool hearing you talk because you remind me of Pete Erickson. I'm not sure if you know Pete at all. He's kind of the Team USA out there. They just won the gold.
Oh, yeah, I know Pete.
Yeah, you know Pete. Well, Pete's kind of been helping us with our Euro nymphing school, and I spent a weekend with him out there, and he sounds just a lot like you. Like he says, hey, Euro nymphing works, but so does all this other stuff. And, you know, it's not like he's focused on just this one thing. He's really kind of like you say, like he's not saying, hey, that you got to have a 5-inch streamer. It's like all this stuff works. You just got to, right? You kind of got to learn and use it and all that. But you guys sound similar. So what's your take? Give me on Pete. Have you just know him through like the show, or how do you know Pete?
I know him from Team USA stuff with a lot of the kids I had at the college were on the team with him.
Oh, right.
And Tim, he did a lot of stuff with Tim. I think he helped him with the shadow.
Oh, yeah, with Ray Jeff. Yeah, with Echo and stuff. Yeah.
Yep, and I helped develop that rod that Tim did. I mean, back when he was with Loomis.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I developed long rods back in '87. Like everybody in the nation said, especially where I live. Nobody would ever do that, because here, all the little fly shops that were here at the time were telling people buy 6-foot rods.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, no. I mean, I already knew. I mean, because I spay cast a lot back then. I mean, in the 80s. And, I mean, with longer stuff. And I knew that it would be nothing but an advantage having 10 to 12-foot rods to trout fish with. And you could dry fly with them. You could wet fly with them. You could nymph with them. You could do everything.
Right.
Just having that longer lever would make life easier, not harder.
Yeah.
Because casting. It's like, here's the thing. There's just a lot of ignorance in the sport that circles the sport. They thought because if you had a longer rod, you'd go in the trees more. It's just because they were bad casters. So, I mean, that's an ignorant thing to say. But the line doesn't go in a tree anymore, whether a rod's 2-foot big or 12-foot big. It has to do with how good are you at controlling the line. And that's what casting is. But as a teacher, that's really what it is. We have to have an awareness of where the line's going.
Yeah, where it's going. What is in that area part where you live near, all the streams you fish, what's the perfect rod? What's the typical rod? If we were coming in to fish with you, what should we be bringing?
I fish always 10.5-foot, 2 weights.
Oh, 2 weights.
That's what I like. Yeah, 10.5-foot twos is what I prefer.
So is this kind of like, would this be more of almost like a Euro nymphing action type rod, or what's the rod type?
No, it's got a slower butt and a fairly fast tip for roll casting. So a lot of those I've had to develop. I mean, have them made.
What would be that rod like? What would be the manufacturer where you could find one of those that you use?
That new stealth rod's really nice that TFO did. That's a nice rod. There's lots of them now, because now everybody's copied it. I mean, the last 30 years, everybody's starting to make a long rod because they didn't think it would ever go. And then when they got big, and everybody guiding or that comp fished was using them, that's what I mean. Just look at it like that. Even in the world event, everybody's fishing that in a big world championship. So people wouldn't fish something to handicap themselves, would they?
No.
And it's been that way for the last 25 years. So in America, it was just slow to get that changed,
Yeah.
Because by the time it got popular, I'd already lost the luster. I mean, I'd already done a bunch of long rods, prototypes with Loomis and a lot of companies that were really state-of-the-art graphite. And I already had an arsenal of them back in the 80s,
Yeah.
Then when it got trendy and everybody was talking about it, I was like, man, y'all are a day late and a dollar short, because it was 25 years later.
Yeah.
When it got popular, you know what I'm saying? So it's just kind of funny,
yeah,
how stuff takes a long time to change.
What about the Euro nymphing stuff? Do you remember when that kind of came, or is more of a newer thing hitting the streets here?
No, I don't think it's new at all. I mean, I think that's how my granddaddy, that's how we fished a lot in the Ozarks on Current River and stuff. I mean, tightlining's been around back in the 30s in America. So the whole thing was just it's just like the 5-inch streamers, okay? It's just another rebranding of the sport.
Marketing.
Bunch of marketing. Let's call it European. That make people will go, what's that? And it's just another rebranding. And that stuff comes from like your big media magazines and all that. But these days, I don't think that those things are carrying near that much clout. Because where's it come from now? I think it's way more on blog posts and people's websites and, shows and things like that. I don't think that it's coming from that, because I think a lot of that's gone backwards too. You used to see a lot of good articles, in printed magazines. Most of them have gone out already. They're not even in publication.
Yeah, it's changed a lot for sure. Yeah, the magazines, the whole scene has changed. And even this right now, right? We're sitting here talking on a podcast, and this was not here, 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah, 10, 15 years ago. And it's just like, I saw one the other day of last month, and I was just like shaking my head. Connor brought up the mail he has to go down and get the mail, every day when he gets out of school. And one of the covers on it said, add a dropper and double your chance. And I was looking at it, just shaking my head. I'm like, man,
yeah,
the sport's regressed.
Right, add a dropper, double your chances, right?
I mean, it's just silly.
Yeah.
It's just silly. It's like, then people I guess they think that's going to get somebody excited, but
yeah,
I don't know. It just kind of kind of turns me off the older I get when I see titles like that. I'm just not even interested in opening the cover.
Yeah, I know. What would be a good title for this? We've kind of been all over the place on this episode, but what would be a good title for this conversation we've had today? What do you think?
Man, that's a good question.
Because when I got into this, I was thinking about, we talked about some of it, fly casting. We talked a little bit about your area. But titles are hard because, it's the first thing that gets people to listen or read, right? But you want to be honest about it and right? It's, I don't know, I have to think about that.
Probably, I don't know, casting. We've talked a lot about casting too. So
yeah,
maybe Southern Appalachia, Great Smoky Mountains region and something about casting.
And something about casting, yeah. I like that. Yeah, it'll be something there.
Yeah, something about that in there with it. But yeah, it's changing. There's some of it that's for the better. I think that, I don't know, the tight line stuff, yeah, I did it a lot as a kid in the 60s. So, but the thing is, I also think it's part of the regression. I probably shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
But I think part of the regression, because anymore in this part of the country, it's gotten so big. And I was the one that taught it at the college and taught a lot of it here in this area. And out of this area, there's been multiple Team USA adults on the team. There's been, 8 world championship teams come out of here with the youth kids.
Oh, wow.
And so then it makes it grow in popularity. And I almost that I hadn't taught it or pushed it as much as I did back then, because it also leads to the regression. Like, what incentive is there to learn to cast once you just lob a piece of mono 10 feet? It's almost the same ball game as bobbers being launched 10 feet.
I've heard that, and I've had Pete and others on talk about that. And I think some of the better known, the champions have always said, hey, Euro is one part of it, but you have to be an all-around angler to win.
That's right. You want to not neglect the other stuff, like we talked about in casting and all.
Yeah.
But I think that in a lot of ways, that's what so much of the people that visit this area, that's what you see a lot of them doing now, as they show up and it's just straight mono, and then they see something 30 feet away and they can't get it there because right now we're fishing really light flies,
Yeah. That's the biggest problem with the mono, the Euro, that whole thing is that
it's limited.
It's limited. And casting, again, so this is you're the perfect person to ask this question, because I think actually I had Ray Jeff on when we were talking about the Echo transfer over, and he asked me this question about, like, what is fly casting? Or what is fly fishing? What makes fly fishing? And that's that whole Euro thing. Like, hey, if you're not casting the line, like, what would be your definition of fly fishing? What do you have to have for it to be fly fishing?
You're talking about Tim, right?
Yeah, Tim. Sorry. Yeah, I was talking about Tim.
So I would say the same thing Tim said. Yeah, because you have to have the whole reason this came about. Oh, that's a good question. Remember that you brought it up for this reason, that we're talking about controlling a loop of line.
Right.
And why do we use a loop of line, like fly line? To propel something that has no weight to go on its own. If you grab a weight fly, like a wet fly, or say you grab a tiny parachute, how far could you throw it with your hand?
Yeah, not very far.
Not very far. You might get it with mono 25, 30 feet if you use the right mono, because not all monos created equal.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, with the right mono, we could still fish it effectively 30, 35 feet away. But not much further, because the mono is going to have a limitation. So yeah, the fly line even silk, going back to the silk days. I still like silk for certain things, but I think that's the whole reason, is because we can have this delivery system for things that are, have air resistance and they weigh very little. So that's how I would define it.
Yeah.
But here's the point that you brought up that I think is kind of ironic. When we start getting really heavy, like heavy articulate 5-inch streamers and things that weigh a lot, even the clouser with big dumbbell lead eyes. I love that fly, and it's a fantastic fly, but you got to really balance the line with it, because now we're kind of doing two things. We got a fly that's real heavy. Now we're trying to make a fly line forming this loop of line. There comes a point where we're fighting the system of we're using this fly line so we can propel things that are weightless. What happens when we start putting real heavy things on it? There comes a point where it's probably more efficient to go back and put it on a spinning rod.
Oh, right.
That's my point.
Yeah, because you're starting to cast, like a spin rod, right?
No, so where is that transition? Probably different for everybody. But but that's what in my mind separates the difference of why would we throw monofilament versus using a fly line.
Yeah, gotcha. Wow, this is awesome, Mac. I want to let you get out here pretty quick. I didn't want to leave the music because I love getting some music background. Talk about what you have going there. Do you have a fiddle next to you right now? Is that something that you play regularly?
Yeah, more guitar here lately. We've been playing a lot of electric guitar here this last year. My oldest boy plays a lot, and he wanted to get into the electric scene, so we got a 62 Les Paul And that's been so fun at night, like having that with the other instruments that we have.
Oh, wow.
So we've been doing a lot like rock stuff with that.
Oh, cool. So you guys are you're playing some music around the house in the evenings?
Oh yeah, every night.
Every night?
Pretty much every night with the boys, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have some music out there that we could listen to, or do you guys, that more just you do around the house?
No, I mean, I play a lot of music out, like still for, mostly for services, you know, like different services, memorials, things like that. But I don't play out like I used to play out a lot, like when I got out of school, play around the festivals all over the country, and I didn't like it at all. I like being back here.
Being here, yeah. What would be a, if like on Spotify, is there a group, a band type of music that somebody could search and listen to, like what you play with that Celtic fiddle?
Well, it's good. I mean, but I do different, a lot of different stuff. Like I like the Dead a lot too. I mean, I was in a Dead cover band for 3 years.
Oh, really? The Grateful Dead.
So, I mean, I like a lot of stuff. Just because I play
Gotcha.
that style doesn't mean I also like playing like Robert Johnson blues.
Yeah.
So
you do it all.
I mean, I like a lot of different music, like most musicians. Most musician friends of mine that I know, I mean, we're into a lot of different kinds of music.
Yeah.
I know it sounds silly, but it's like, yeah, as far as bluegrass, I grew up playing bluegrass a lot in East Tennessee. So, I mean, there's killer bands out there in bluegrass. I mean, there are better bands today than there probably ever been.
Yeah.
Like I was listening earlier before this podcast to Molly Tuttle and Golden Highway, Billy Strings. I mean, there's some phenomenal players like Seth Taylor's from here, Woodbox Heroes. That's a great band. They just played the Opry the other night. I mean,
oh, wow.
There's a lot of good bands out there.
Perfect. That's all I wanted. Yeah, we got a little scratching my own niche. I got some stuff to plug in and listen to here today. So cool. Well, I'll let you get out of here, Mac. I appreciate your time. This has been great. I think we've covered a lot of topics, but we'll send everybody out to macbrownflyfish.com. And then if they want to check your guide school, what's the website again for the guide school?
It's flyfishingguideschool.com.
Yeah, Fly Fishing Guide School. Awesome. Well, thanks for all today for all the time, and love this conversation. I love it. I think it gave a lot of people a lot of things to think about, and especially on the casting and everything there. So definitely, we'll look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Dave. Thanks for having me.
That is a wrap. You can grab all of the show notes at wetflyswing.com. And please follow us on Instagram and share this episode out with someone you love. Please send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, if you have any feedback or want us to put together an episode on this podcast for you. Check in anytime. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and would love to meet up with you on the water. We have new fly fishing schools going all year long and all around the country, so if you want to connect, let's do it right now. All right, time to get out of here. I hope you have a great evening. I hope you have a great morning or great afternoon wherever in the world you are. And I appreciate you for stopping by and checking out the show today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.